Ready?
Got open man. DJ Moore. End zone. Touchdown. Touchdown Bears.
I am Jeff Joniak.
Blitz is on. Down he goes. Oscar.
What was it like playing for Coach Ditka?
I don't want to answer any questions like that.
Pressure coming. He's in big trouble. Down he goes. Montez Sweat.
And
Now, Bears Etc. brought to you by Miller Lite with the voices of the Bears, Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer.
Welcome in to episode 75 of the Bears Etc. podcast. Jeff Joniak here with Super Bowl Bears winning guard Tom Thayer, and our special guest this week, his 85 Bears teammate, also a Super Bowl winning safety, one of the best stories, in my opinion, in NFL history. We had the hammer on Mark Carrier on episode 64, I think, Tommy. That was coined by Ron Rivera for friendly fire. And then on the back end of the 70s, 80s Bears, we had Doug Plank on as well. I guess he was one of the two hit men. You're the other one. And so some big hitting safeties in Bears history, and glad to have number 45. A guy by the name of Gary Fencik. We'll get into that. I never knew about the John part. And number 30 on the Bears' 100 greatest players of all time. And we are sponsored by this episode by Miller Lite. Gary, good to see you. One of the legends of the Bears.
Well, as a season ticket holder, I'm excited about talking about the current Bears as well.
Yes. But going back to being one of the best Bears of all time leader in interceptions, and those younger folks who may have not done their homework on a Gary Fencik, he was a wide receiver at Yale, drafted by the Miami Dolphins in round 10, not able to finish there because of an injury, I think a lung injury or something like that with the Dolphins.
My lung, and guess who it was a short pass against playing against the New Orleans Saints, whose quarterback in this scrimmage game in Vero Beach, Florida, was Bobby Douglas.
No way. Now that I didn't know. Tommy, did you know that?
I said,
yes.
Bobby Douglas is responsible for me being a Chicago Bear.
That's amazing.
He completed a short pass, and as a Bears fan, I go, he never did that in the real games, but in this one he did. I tackled a guy, cracked a rib, and ruptured my lung.
You still remember that moment?
You know, it wasn't like a big surprise, but I actually thought that I had made the team because Jake Scott, who was the all-pro free safety for the Miami Dolphins, had held out the entire training camp. And even though I was injured, you know, as you get the cuts and everything, it was like, hey, I think I might make this. And Don Shula, the coach, always gave the cuts. And he goes, the final cut, Jake Scott, we have traded Jake Scott to the Washington Redskins. And I go, I'm there.
Wow.
I made it. And they go, and we traded for a safety. And I was like, I'm gone, you know? So I had a really funny roommate who was a good artist, and he would cut or make drawings of all the different ways that you could get out of Miami. Trains, planes. I mean, it was really funny. You know, you get that sadistic sense of humor, you know, when I was a 10B. You know, they only have, 6 rounds now? I wasn't the A. They actually had an A, and I was the B. So, you know, your chances coming out of the Ivy League, you don't go to the Ivy League, you would think.
Right.
You're going to be in the NFL. But hey, it worked out, and really, really grateful.
You know, Gary, you said Bobby Douglas is responsible for you being a Chicago Bear. You being a Chicago Bear, what did your local roots, similar to mine, how did they influence you as a Chicago Bear? Did it put more pressure on you to perform, or did it add more support for you to be able to perform?
Well, one, you can appreciate this. It was nice that my parents and my brothers and sisters could come to the game, right? Didn't have to fly anywhere or do that. I don't think it put any pressure on me. I mean, I was on a fluke anyway. But I think that what it does is that you really empathize with the fans about the frustration and, you know, all the things that we had gone through, Tom, in our, you know, childhood. I mean, I kind of remember the 63 Bears, but you know, after that, it was just, we had a great running back. We had a great middle linebacker. We had good defenses, if not great defenses, but we weren't a very good team.
When you played wide receiver in college, did you have to learn how to tackle when you got to this level, or was it something that became natural to you because you got tackled so often?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think being a wide receiver in college helped me recognize patterns a little bit more. But in terms of tackling, no. I didn't want to play wide receiver. My senior year, I threatened not to come out because I wanted to play DB. And our coach wouldn't do it. He said, you're too valuable to us. But then when, the Miami Dolphins said, hey, we went back and looked at your freshman year film. Nobody has freshman teams anymore. They said, you're frankly too slow to be a wide receiver in the NFL, but we've seen some transitions of people going from offense to defense. I mean, I think the most notable one in my mind was Rex Kern, who had been a quarterback at Ohio State and was a safety with the Baltimore Colts. And I go, great, that's what I want to do. So that wasn't, it was still hard. I mean, I'd never played college defensive back. And, Tom, I don't know. I know you really think highly of your position coach, but I had a couple of position coaches who really weren't fundamentalists. As a matter of fact, I learned and I became the player I am or was because of Doug Plank. I just emulated what Doug did. And we had Craig Clemens, who was the number one draft choice. We had some good safeties. Hey, through my entire career, whether Dewerson or, just a lot of guys.
Todd Bell.
And I actually went to my first defensive coach, position coach, pulled me over one time and said, hey, I'm a little worried about, you're using your head a lot. And I'm just throwing my body. It's not like I'm using my head. But he goes, you could get injured that way. And I go, yeah, I need some help. I need some real coaching. And he basically said that wasn't his thing, and so
it wasn't his thing it wasn't his thing to give you the fundamentals?
He didn't say it quite that way,
wow.
But he basically said, I'm not really a fundamentalist coach. And I liked Ross. He was a really good guy. But I think that you probably run into some coaches, even today in the NFL, who make this assumption that you have all the fundamentals down, and now they just have to kind of enhance your skill set. And the fact is, there are a lot of people who go to different positions. That's a lot easier to maybe say, oh, you're going to have to do this. But there are also just a lot of coaches, and I would say probably older maybe than younger ones, who basically kind of not their thing.
Well, Tommy, technique and fundamentals is all you talk about, and that's the game, Tommy and Gary. That's the game.
Sometimes I'm listening to Tom and I go, and he's talking about the line and all this stuff, and then I almost feel like saying, did that guy catch the ball?
I know.
That's my job.
Hey, I've learned a lot while listening to Hampton and all those guys up front, but also listening to you guys on the radio, because it's so important. And while you can kind of say, yeah, the offensive line, they're kind of it's the necessary plumbing. But if you don't have the plumbing, and the Bears haven't had the plumbing on a consistent basis, you can't execute. And it's nice. I mean, one of our phrases at work used to be execution supersedes intentions. Everybody wants to do well, but you've got to be able to get it done. And the joy for me to be on kind of average teams to the last 5 years of my career, great teams, is that you're looking across playing free safety and in the huddle, looking at the defensive guys. And, it's third down and we need a play. And you aren't going to have you might get an interception, you might break on the ball, right? But you need a pass rush. You really need it. And I could look at those guys, and you can't pull that too often, but they knew, and they were confident they were going to get it done. So it was a lot of fun to be able to play, particularly at free safety, because you see everything in front of you. I mean, you might go, oh, you know what? We run that 46 blitz where you got Otis and Wilbur on the left side. They don't have a back over there. They can't block it. And so you don't need to take too many steps backwards, because they're going to be at that quarterback in 2 seconds. And if the tight end took Wilbur or he took Otis, the other one had a complete free run to the quarterback. So you take 2 steps and go, boom. I mean, the ball's either out or, those guys have another great hit.
The introduction of the 46 defense, when you first started to learn about it, did you kind of have a feeling that when you looked at it on the chalkboard that it was going to be able to relate successfully to the field? Or was it something that you kind of had to practice the plan to make it workable?
I think I won't say there was a lot of skepticism, because you're just going, hey, it's different. And, we weren't winning. And so you're willing to try anything. But, it just puts, and Buddy would say this, it puts the whole secondary in a more vulnerable position, particularly the cornerbacks. Because, if that ball comes out quick and they beat the blitz or they just beat the pressure, you don't have the normal set of linebackers. There's many people in that middle lane. So a guy catches a quick slant pass, who knows what could happen. I think we did that first game. Doug would know. I think we did it against the Chargers and Fouts. And I tell you, Neil Armstrong's speech wasn't very encouraging to everybody, but we won that game. It's like, wow, that 46 thing really worked out. But that was the great thing about Buddy Ryan, is that he trusted his players. And that's one thing I didn't see in any other defensive coordinators that I played under, that they really didn't trust the players as much. And that takes a lot, to subjugate your ego when you're the head, the coordinator, you do exactly what I'm going to do. But I would say 40 or 50% of our plays were that automatic front and coverage. We called it AFC for short.
All right.
And on Wednesday, we'd get the game plan. And, if they were in split, we were running this front, this coverage. If they went to an I, could be a different coverage, a different, line charge. And then we started doing it on blitzes. And you had to have smart guys. And so, you'd need to be tough and physical and fast and big and all that stuff. But you couldn't play on that defense if you made any mental errors. I mean, if you made 3 mental errors in a game, I really don't think you would be playing the next week. So we felt that the offense couldn't put us in a bad position because we were basically working off of their tendencies. And, it was just so much fun. Even inside the 20, the red zone, we'd have a safety blitz. I would go one side of the center and Singletary would go the other. And Buddy would say, do not time it because, you got to get to that quarterback right away. And then if you thought you heard an audible, a real one, we would then audible out into something called 99, and we would filter out the safeties and show that we're doubling the wide receivers. And it was just so great. Like you just couldn't get us mentally. And we all just felt so proud of, hey, but you had to study. You got that game plan, that AFC chart on Wednesday. And, through the rest of the week, you had to know what we were going to do. And when you got 60, 70,000 people screaming and yelling, and you might have to use hand signals and everything, but you got to make sure that everybody heard or is on the same plan.
We're brought to you by Miller Lite. Tastes like Miller time. Go to MillerLite.com/BearsPod to find delivery options near you. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. So basically, to summarize the 46, you guys had the answers to the test, all the tests, and they did not on the other side of the ball. That was a hard defense to diffuse over time, and which leads me to this. Why isn't it used more and more prominently? Is it because of the people that played the positions that were necessary to make it the 46?
No, I think it's because the passing game has evolved so much over the last 20 years. The key is making quick decisions, and the good quarterbacks would make quick decisions. But if you do a 5 or 7 step drop,
dead meat.
It's tough. And so I think what you really see is that, one, you've spread out. You got 3-4 wide receivers. You got 3 routes and a split tight end as a normal, where you still were having a tight end, a fullback, and 2 wideouts. Third down would be different. But I think that just puts a lot of pressure on the cornerbacks. Anybody on a man-to-man or you're blitzing, if that quarterback sees it and makes a quick decision and gets a little time, you're going to be pretty vulnerable. Having said that, I've talked to some guys who say, hey, there still are versions of the 46 that exist in today's game. So
yeah, we see it on tape every now and again, right, Tommy? But it's not consistent.
Let me just say, the key to beating any good offense is making them make decisions in the pass game quickly. Because if you're running a timing route, it's just got to be so precise. And if you have a defense that's having a good day, not going to be any different today than it was, 30 years ago, where you're like, wow, somebody's just eating up the guard or the tackle, and that, you can try to chip them and do all the other stuff, but it certainly makes it a lot easier. But it kind of gets to the whole thing. You got to have a pass rush.
Yeah.
And if you don't have those guys, it can be a really long day in here.
Hey, Gary, I'm on YouTube a lot. I listen and watch old games because I love football, and you forget about some of these things. And one is tied into the 1977 game against the Giants and your big hit on Jimmy Robinson, the tight end. But listening to the call on television, Johnny Morris was one of the two color men, and the great Vince Scully was on the call. Quote, Fencik knocked him loose from his senses, almost knocked him to Jersey City because it was in the Meadowlands. But that hit also caused a bit of some controversy, right, for you over time because they started referring to you as a dirty player over time. They're using that hit as one of the examples. How did that sit with you? Did you care at the time? Because you were not a dirty player. You were a hard, vicious hitter just like Doug was and many other players in that era. That was 1977, second year.
That was before the no bump rule. And so, and I just have to correct you. It was Jimmy Robinson, but he was a little wide receiver.
Oh, he's a wide receiver. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I nailed him. Emmerich was on that team. Everett Moorhead was on the Giants.
Yep.
And it was just a good, it was a rotation, and Pisarcik, just took too long to throw it. It was a great hit. But that whole game, that was my second year. And Jack Pardee was our head coach, and the equipment manager said, hey, bring all your shoes. I go, we're playing artificial turf. Why would I bring my grass shoes or spikes? He goes, bring them. And, I was in my second year, I'm listening, I put everything in there. And we needed to win that game against the Giants in order to go to the playoffs, which we did, but it went into overtime. And so on Saturday, when we were just warming up out there, it was a nice mild day. The next morning, it sleeted. Yeah. The entire game was a sleet storm. Walter was trying to break O.J. Simpson's rushing record for his season. You couldn't do anything. Bob Thomas, you couldn't kick. You couldn't do anything. And then it went into overtime when we're yelling at those Giant guys, like, "What you guys aren't going anywhere. Just what are you doing?" But that was a good hit. And to be an Ivy Leaguer and have people calling you a cheap shot artist, it's kind of like, it's almost like a badge of honor, right?
Right.
Like, hey, I must be doing something right here. And then Madden, on his first Madden team, he was calling me clean dirt. I loved it. I just loved it. So yeah, I've kind of milked it. But if there was ever a hit man, come on, Doug Plank is the guy.
Right.
I mean, Doug Plank. Doug would be in the huddle. We'd be, behind 2 touchdowns. We weren't going to win the game. He goes, time to have fun. And his idea was fun. Was
you remember the Jimmy Giles hit?
Oh, sure, yeah. That was. I think Jimmy was getting up when Doug hit him.
Broke his sternum.
And I'll tell you what. I loved playing with Doug Buffone, and Doug, as you know, was the last guy to play under George Halas as a head coach. And, so here's Doug. He doesn't have a front tooth, and he's got his hands all taped up as those linebackers used to have. He's smoking cigarettes. I was blown away getting in, from the Ivy League. I said, oh, these guys are smoking cigarettes at halftime. I was like such a goof. I mean, it was just so out of place. But Doug would say, hey, we may not win this game today, but they're going to know that they played the Chicago Bears. And that was the attitude. And I just loved playing with those old-time guys. And then, we became those old-time guys as the team really developed.
Gary, you're a season ticket holder. You're a fan of the game. When you think of that hit back then in 1977, what part of your game is transferable to today, and what part of your game is no longer a part of the game? And then the different rules changes by offenses that made, the contact rules and stuff. Where would you assume your game to be at this point?
Well, I think, one, you have to, as a defensive back or any player, you adjust to the rules. You may not like them, but you get used to them. I mean, you could hit receivers. There was no 5-yard bump rule for my first 2 years, I think. Now, I didn't play the first year, so it didn't matter. But the second year, man, you could nail guys. And they weren't even in the play. You just nail them completely legal. And then they had this no bump rule. You go, what is this? And but James Lofton with the Packers, I used to nail him a lot, and Doug too. And we would hit those guys. And I made the Pro Bowl, and I was out with James. He was with Green Bay Packers. And he goes, and we're just having a drink coincidentally together. And he goes, what's with you and Plank? I mean, why do you always have to hit us all the time? I go, I'm just doing my job. And so he had an opportunity the next season to really cold cock me, and he didn't. He could have, but he didn't. And that changed. I never really hit James, I didn't have to, obviously I tackle him if he got the ball. But, you kind of set up, there's a certain level of respect that, you really don't do certain things to certain people, and maybe it doesn't matter as much with others. But you also, when you play in the division, like Paul Kaufman, who was a tight end with the Packers, just a great guy. I mean, I looked at it as I wished my best friend was playing across from me, and I was going to nail him every single time and help him up and just go, God, that's just great. I just nailed you. And he could do the same. And it actually happened to me against the Atlanta Falcons. Jeff, the center.
Jeff Van Note.
Yeah, Van Note.
Yep.
Great guy. We were both on the player reps of the union. So I got to know Jeff pretty well. And then we had a blitz where I had the back always took the free safety and the center always took Singletary. And so I am not even thinking about Jeff, and he takes me. And I mean, he lifted me off of my feet, took me, I think he literally took me 5+ yards into the backfield, and then lifted me up, pile drove me into the artificial turf at Soldier Field, laughing all the way and just going, oh my God, I can't believe this. Thank you so much. This could be the hit of the year for me. I was like, yeah, thanks a lot. But you have that kind of camaraderie. It's respect and everything else. And then there are certain games, and most of them being with Green Bay Packers. Tighten up, man, because it's going to be a battle, particularly during those years when McMahon got cheap shotted, and it really got ugly with those. But that's few and far between.
Is there a significant difference between the Buddy Ryan 46 defense and the Vince Tobin defense? Because statistically, you guys were more successful that year. And then, what was the difference?
He didn't have automatics front coverage. He didn't give us any control over the game. He called every play. That's just the huge difference. And Buddy, when we were watching film, you make a circle of love, and it's going to be a tough morning if you lose the game. But after that, boom. And Buddy was a sergeant in the Korean War. And I think it has something to do with that military background where you had to really earn that trust. But once you got it, it was like you really climbed the mountain. And all of a sudden it was, hey, we're all in the circle. It was a great thing. And, Buddy looks like curmudgeon and all this stuff. But, you talk to any of the players who played for him. We love playing for him.
Gary, I've heard in the past you mentioned that when Dan Hampton became a Bear, that changed the direction of the team. Obviously, that's before the 85 bunch got all together. And 84, you guys were clicking. But as he's about to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we got to talk about Steve McMichael and the impact from your view from a defensive side. Tommy's explained it in depth. He has great respect for his intelligence of the game, his knowledge of the game, his toughness in the game. And how would you discuss that as he goes into the Hall of Fame, which is just an unbelievable honor for him at this point?
Oh, God, yeah. And I just was at his house last week. And as you know, it's not a real pretty scene right now with ALS. I think that each one of, Dan did change the defense. And I think he changed the offense too. Tom has a better opinion of that than I do. But then we got Richard. And Richard, just having a great outside pass rush is fantastic. I think that Steve was in some ways underappreciated just because we had these other, guys who were a little, just had a little more publicity and had stats. But I think he was a real good thinker on the field. I mean, I think he was a really good technician. And he also got cut from the New England Patriots, as I did for the Miami Dolphins. And that always puts you in you just have a chip on your shoulder. You always have to kind of prove yourself. And I think that Steve had that personality. He's always grabbing his belt like he was in the World Federation of Wrestling. And he talked a big game and all that. But when you actually, people were kind of surprised because he did all of that. but then when you're actually with him, he was really a really nice guy. You're kind of caught off guard, like you're expecting him to do something like he's going to punch you or wrestle you or take you down. And instead it was like, hey, that's great. But, he was very proud of being a Texas Longhorn. And I know that Tom's probably told this story before, but, he met his match with Jimbo Covert in a fight on the field. But I think, again, it was just, we had this great group of different personalities on offense and on defense. And one of the reasons I believe that the 85 Bears, I can't believe it's been that long, but the reason people still relate to it is that we had characters on the offense, on the defense. It had nothing to do with being manufactured. We're probably lucky as hell that there weren't Apple phones. It just was a tremendous and an evolving story. I mean, for guys like Walter and myself, I was the oldest defensive player and Walter was the oldest offensive player. You knew how special it was starting to become, but you never knew, are you going to get there? And I think in my mind, when we beat Washington in '84 in Washington, I mean, we took it to them. That all of a sudden, I think everybody kind of woke up going, hey, we can do it. And then we got, trounced by the 49ers, but again, McMahon didn't play. And I don't know about you, Tom, I've never really talked specifically about it, but, there were a lot of tears in that locker room. And I think that Ditka just grabbed us and caught us in that moment the first time we met in 1985, that basically saying, hey, second best isn't good enough. And I think we just really were focused that entire season. And, we lost the Monday night game. That's after we had beaten Dallas, which I had never beaten Dallas, and that was my 10th year. Had never beaten them in a preseason, regular season, or postseason game. And they were going to take me out in the fourth quarter. And I told Buddy Ryan, I got to get one more series here. I've waited 10 years for this. And then we beat the Atlanta Falcons 36-0. So we waltz into Miami. It's a big game. McMahon doesn't start and doesn't play till the end. And Miami, give them credit. They just really outplayed us in that first half defensively. And we couldn't catch up. But I think if we had gone undefeated, maybe you had somewhat of a lackadaisical attitude when you got into the playoffs, and you just can't afford to do that.
Gary, one step backwards, because when you talk about all the pieces in place, when you talk about the Wilbers, the Otis, the Singletaries, all the defensive backs, all the players on offense and stuff, when you look at McMichael and you look at Jimbo, are they two players that kind of had an effect in changing your mind of the direction where each side of the ball could go with those two additions to the team?
Oh, yeah, but I think that, when you look through that 85 team, gosh, no free agency, and everybody's a first or second round draft choice. I mean, it was amazing. So, you had Walter Payton. You always had Walter, but we didn't have a QB, or we didn't really have speed on the outside. And so I think all the pieces start to fit in, and you start to collectively believe in yourself. But until you actually start winning significant games and getting those milestones, it's hard to really believe. And, you almost have to believe in yourself. And I think that, that 84 season, a lot of things came together. And then 85, it was like, wow. I mean, it was like we were on overdrive. It was fun. I mean, we were hammering people. And the defense was just had everybody. And it was odd because we didn't have Todd Bell, and he gets replaced by Dave Duerson. He becomes all-pro. And then Wilbur Marshall starts for the first time in place of Al Harris. I mean, those guys had no free agency. I don't know why they thought they could hold out, and it doesn't matter anymore. But it was just a wonderful ride. You just hope at some point you get there. And when you finally do, wow, you don't realize how significant winning a Super Bowl is for the rest of your life. It never goes away. And this team was bigger than life in so many different ways, with the Super Bowl shuffle and all the other stuff. but it's just a milestone that I'm glad that I had the opportunity.
You know, you talk about Buddy Ryan had this perception of being an old curmudgeon, and everybody kind of figured out what a defensive genius he was. But when you look at that group of guys, and I wasn't there when Mike Ditka came to work the first day, you were there and you had been there for a while. That whole transformation of the building when Mike Ditka became the head coach, what do you think was the biggest step from the other head coaches that you played for, but now you got the personality of Mike Ditka?
Campbell in Detroit reminds me of Ditka.
Me too.
Yeah, Tom talks about that all the time.
And so Mike Ditka comes in, and we're laughing. It's not like I know a lot of guys down in Dallas, but they're going, "Good luck, you got Ditka, special teams coach," and you're like, "Oh gosh." And I did write a letter to George Halas that led to George Halas keeping Buddy Ryan. And so think about that. Ditka had to inherit a defensive coordinator that I'm sure wanted the head coaching job. But either way, his first speech was, "Hey, I've been watching you guys," and he's going on. And this is my third head coach in like 6 years. And he goes, "Here's our goal. Our goal is to win the NFC North." Or were we the Central? Yeah.
Central, yeah.
Central, to win the NFC, to get to and win the Super Bowl. And you're like, yeah. I mean, but it was the first time any head coach had said, "These are the goals." And he goes, "And I'm looking at you, son of a guns. Half of you won't be there when we get there." And you're like, okay, setting the tone. But then he started getting rid of guys. And Tom, I think the difference was everybody else talked a good game, but man, he got rid of Noah Jackson. We had Kurt Becker was a rookie. And we're like, whoa, wait a minute. These guys are good players, but they weren't on the bus. And so he really lived up to that. And then all of a sudden, you start getting rid of some guys and you go, this guy might be crazy, but he's the head coach. And so it didn't happen initially, but he really, really cared. And that was the other thing. I mean, I laugh. Tom, were you with us when we played that? The only time I ever played a preseason game at County Stadium in Milwaukee was against the Packers. And Ditka was coach, and we were on the same sideline, both teams. And it's like the first preseason game. Okay, I'm going to play a quarter and I'll be out. Ditka and Forrest Gregg, you would have thought we were playing the Super Bowl. They were screaming and yelling at one another. It's a preseason game. And I'm looking over at, some of the Packer guys I know. We're all like, whoa, what's this one about? But those guys, it was funny. But again, it was just another one of those things where you go, hey, this isn't one game. This is every day that you wake up and you put that uniform on, you are expected to be a Chicago Bear in however Mike Ditka and the team were defining it. And you know what? They were right. You've got to, it isn't just a matter of I want. You've got to really be committed. You have to make that commitment, not just to yourself, but to your teammates and the coaches and to the fans. And I think, you start to see that. And I see that in Campbell and Detroit and go, man, those guys, they really, really care. They're not hoping. They don't care. They don't have all of these big stars. And I felt that, at some point you start looking, going, you know what? You're almost afraid to say it, but you go, we could do it. We can really do this. And you have to have those hump games. Like when we beat the Dallas Cowboys 44-0, that was a big, big game. And, and then the Miami game, however, we used to have to run gassers. And for those of you who don't know, you run 5 yards and back, 10 yards back, you go 40 yards. I mean, it gasses you out. And we only had to do that when we lost a game. And so we lose that Monday night game and we came back. I mean, it was like 3 a.m. and we had to do those bumps and bruises and watch that film. Buddy Ryan was excited about going out there because it had been the first time all year that he could organize those gassers. And I think we ran we did extras but everybody was laughing because we all knew it was kind of cathartic. It's like, we screwed up that game. We can't afford to ever do that again. And everybody was just kind of laughing and running hard. And it was just like, okay, let's move on.
No cause for concern. When it's time to tackle some game day deals, then go with the grocer who's been part of Chicago since 1899, Jewel Osco, the official grocery store of the Chicago Bears. And we're brought to you by PNC, official bank of the Bears. Gary Fencik, our guest here on Bears, Etc. Did you accomplish everything you wanted to accomplish in the NFL from whatever goals you ultimately put out there, or if you were a goal-oriented guy? And then same thing in your business life. Because you had a very successful business career. Now you're retired again. And on top of all that, you've kept yourself in unbelievable shape. You look great. I hope you feel great. I think you're 70 now, if I'm not mistaken. You've leaped into that era. But I mean, you've had quite the life, Gary.
Yeah. Well, I can't say that I had any goals in the NFL because I didn't ever think I could be in the NFL. I mean, it wasn't a goal for me. It wasn't realistic. You don't go to Yale saying, yeah, I always wanted to be a safety, or I would have gone to Wisconsin, which I had a full ride there in Minnesota. So it was kind of serendipity. But, once you're there, of course, you start to raise your goals and everything else. I think I would have been very frustrated if we hadn't won the Super Bowl. I think any player would. I don't care if you make $100 million. If you don't really get that opportunity for once in your life, and it's probably not going to happen in business, but once in your life, with no question, you are the best. And it's a team goal. And so you're with all of these guys that have collectively gone through the ups and the downs, and, different guys, because it's not like college where I'm a sophomore and you're a senior. You got guys who are 10 years older than you. Kevin Butler was a rookie. Walter and I were 30-something. And so it was an amazing feeling of camaraderie and goal orientation and making that commitment, and it actually works. So I can't say, in terms of, still having the interception record, God, I thought that Carrier would get it. He had 13 his rookie year. I was like, write that thing. I'll be handing him the ball in a few years. But, everybody keeps, I'm hoping somebody breaks it. Now, before I have to be on a wheelchair, they come out, and here's the current holder, on that tackles, I think I'm now like the third or fourth guy. Urlacher and I think Singletary beat me, but since it, somehow it got into the press, I have to admit that, but it's still kind of weird that your safety is the leading tackler in the team. That's necessary. That's not really a good sign for a franchise. So I think one of the, in terms of business, I was very fortunate, and I know players can't do this today. I went to business school while I was playing. And that's after I had encouragement from a wonderful mentor. And he said, you could go while you're playing. I go, yeah, I could wait till after I'm done too. But then I would have tried to go to business school, and I was like 33 years old. And I broke my arm opening day, had to have my ankle reconstructed, blew my knee out in a failed safety blitz against the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm in that hospital in Lake Forest, and I got the coaches and my family and all that. And my mentor comes in, he goes, I don't know if this is a good time to talk about it, but I think business school would be really good. And I go, Bob, I think another shot of morphine is going to help me. But I ended up a year later coming back, made all pro, and started business school. I think it gets more difficult. I came out and I had a wonderful career, but some way you're a little stunted because you're in your 30s when you're starting a career as opposed to being in the 20s. And so, I was with a great group of people for the last 20 years. I was in a private equity firm, one of the lead partners, and it was just a great group to be with. And I learned so much, and it just all worked out. So Gary Fencik has no complaints whatsoever. And I'm even, now that I've had my knee replaced, that was because of that failed safety blitz like 40 years ago. I'm getting hurt now playing tennis. I tore my rotator cuff. I tore my Achilles heel. But you know what? I'm still pretty competitive. So I get back, but it's definitely slowing me down.
Gary, there's always pickle.
Believe me, I was at dinner last night with some good friends, and they were talking about, hey, there's a special thing on, just being in the kitchen shots. And I go, oh, come on, really? I'm going to go for a lesson to be able to do dink.
Yes, dink and dunk.
Dink. Yeah, right. Okay. Hey, when I had my rotator cuff, that was a really tough injury. And this woman who worked on me all of my rehab for like 30 years, I'm in her office at a club, and I have a 2-pound weight, and I'm trying to, rotate it back. I told her, hey, you got to close the door. If anybody sees an 85 Bear can't even lift a 2-pound weight, I'm just going to blow the whole coverage for the 85 Bears. But I've been fortunate.
That's amazing because when Jeff and I were talking to Doug Plank, he talks about how he has dumbbells intermittently placed in each room in his house. And when he walks into that room specifically, he does a set of whatever exercise is required with those dumbbells. And, when you look at you and Doug together and what you guys did in contribution to the Bear and the history of the sport and everything, the Bears fans are fortunate to have you guys. But, Plank is still he's an inspiration. He really is, because his attitude and his enthusiasm is really contagious.
Yeah, and I love talking to Doug. He is so enthusiastic. I have 100-pound dumbbells in my garage that I used to be able to do overheads and stuff like that. Now it's like I'm a little nervous. I might get hurt lifting one up. But those days of doing 275 cleans or something like that, it's like, yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Enjoy. Don't get hurt, because that's all would happen to me at this point. But, I get back to Doug Plank. It's so funny because I know, Tom, you get these letters. I get them as well. Please sign. I must be on a good guy list of signing autographs. But I'll run into people, even today, and they'll say, hey, Doug, I loved the way you and Fencik played football. And it happens to Doug, too. And, it's not like, he has blonde hair. I have dark hair. It shouldn't be that difficult. But it's funny because I know it happens to him as well.
Well, this is exactly, I've said this all the time, Tommy. I think we agree. Like you said earlier, it's the Buffons, it's the history, it's how the Bears are, in your mind's eye, supposed to play football, right? And you want to make sure, if you're not going to win the game, you make sure they know they played the Chicago Bears. That's how I envision what I believe this, an NFL team. Yes, you want them to win a Super Bowl. You want them in multiple Super Bowl win champions, but I want them to reflect kind of the city that they play in and the people. And that is, it's a hardworking, blue collar city that broad shoulders, the whole bit, and the history of the franchise and some other franchises. In this city, you talk about the old Blackhawks, how rough and tumble they were, and I think the Bears are getting there. You stay in tune with it, you follow it, you watch it. You're a season ticket holder. You're often a guest talking about the Bears. This 3-year progress that they've made under Ryan Poles. How do you view it? How do you see it? How do you feel about it moving forward here in 24?
Well, I'm optimistic, but unlike being in business where you might have a really good team, it's not like, oh, sorry, guy just blew his knee out. He won't be able to contribute for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
You just look at that, and the Bears get a little snake bit every team. You have to be healthy. And I guess that's one ingredient we didn't even talk about. In order to get to the Super Bowl, you have to be fortunate not to have a lot of serious injuries, particularly at key positions. And so that's going to be, and so you need depth as well. It isn't just having the top line. I think the Bears are building the right way. I'm really encouraged by what I see. I think Poles has made some, clearly getting this year's first round pick from Carolina was a great move. But now you really have to move forward. And it's going to be even tougher because Green Bay is for real. And everything that we're talking about the Chicago Bears this year, everybody in Minnesota is saying the same thing. They got a good offensive line. They got great wide receiver. And then we got Detroit. And it's like, really? Come on, Detroit Lions? And you're like, yeah, they're for real. So you have to earn your way, and it's going to be stair-stepped when you've got some key rookies. And it's going to take a little bit of time for them, and it's not going to be every game they're even better than the previous ones. But there's good depth. And I look at like the DBs right now. Wow. I mean, Johnson, Jalen, whatever you think about him being almost like crazy enough to take that risk and get rewarded for him, God bless him. I really like Brisker a lot. I'm a little nervous about him, or concerned, I would say, about the concussions, because he's had at least 2, and I don't know if he had any at Penn State, but that isn't something that just goes away. And then I don't really know Kevin, the new free safety, but certainly he has a great pettibone. And Eddie Jackson was gosh, he came out his first couple of years, and if I had his coverage skills, I might still be playing. I mean, he really, for a free safety, that dude could cover.
Yeah.
Questionable about his tackling. I mean, but that, I would say I'll say old timer, going for the strip is, if somebody's got to go for the tackle first, then go for the strip. And I don't know if Peanut Tillman just made it so, hey, you really get the glory if you get the strip. But I don't think he missed a lot of tackles, but I saw a lot of missed tackles last year. And then, you have Tyreek, who was a real surprise. So, you have this young secondary, with the exception of your free safety, and all kind of like second round picks, which shows you how important that is. It's not just the first round, but it's getting the depth. You got good linebackers. And I think the only thing they're missing right now, and Tom, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, they need another edge guy. And because people are going to keep the tight end, they're going to keep it back, they're going to chip, Sweat. And that's, all you have to do is look at what people have been doing with Hutchinson over in Detroit. Same thing, you got to get pressure on the other side, and then that defense will be pretty complete. I'm making an assumption that the defensive tackles who are young will continue to improve.
Gary, that's one of my concerns about the Bears. Is it's not a 7-on-7 league. It's about what your offense and defensive lines can contribute to the overall performance of your team. So I was talking about Travis Smith, the defensive line coach, because it's not only coaching 4 guys, it's trying to find at least 7 guys when you talk about the rotation. And then I need 5, as Ditka used to say, 5 blocks of granite on the offensive line, guys that are there every day and they perform at a high level and they give you some consistency on the offense and defensive line. So you talked about being the leader in interceptions in the history of the Bears. When do you think, or do you think, that this team, this group of receivers and Caleb is capable of having a 4,000-yard passing quarterback?
God, as a Chicago Bear fan, Tom, it's like, come on, man, we haven't seen one of those. It's like, I'm not going to put expectations for this year, but I would think in year 2, definitely. But I'm not going to say it's impossible. My son went to USC, so I've watched a lot of USC games, even the Notre Dame USC games, Tom. And, he had a really poor offensive line, but he still had good stats last year. USC just seems to be a team that doesn't realize that there is something called defense. They're always about glory guys and quarterbacks and running backs. But I do think that when you see some of the things that he's capable of doing, and his, I've talked to a lot of head coaches, a lot of position coaches about that quarterback position. It's so difficult because it's almost a disadvantage to be at Alabama or Ohio State or Georgia, because you got 5 all-pro linemen, you got 2 first-round picks at wide. You're just better talent. And then you get into the NFL, and you actually do have to get rid of that ball. You can't smoke a cigarette back there. And I just it can have a real impact, negative impact on your psyche. But he's made all these adjustments. And I've watched a lot of games, and he's scrambling around, but he is looking for the dagger. And that's one thing that I didn't see our quarterbacks do last year. Fields never really looked for the killer downfield. He might throw it, but he's not, saying, I know now that they're in man-to-man and the right side is wide open and the free safety drifted the wrong way, and this guy's wide open and it's a touchdown. And you go, wow, that's someone who's looking downfield. I rarely saw that with Fields. And I just think that you have to have kind of that it factor. to be able to. I think that's intuitive. I don't think that's anything that you can coach. And some guys get it, and some guys don't.
Gary Fencik, our guest, and we're brought to you by PNC, official bank of the Bears. And with 188 convenient locations, it's easy to touch down at any Jewel Osco store. We'll find an all-star lineup of fan-friendly favorites. Jewel Osco, Chicago's go-to local grocery store since 1899. Our final thoughts with Gary. Thank you so much for all this time. Number one pick, going to London again. That's going to be a prime thing. You've got Hard Knocks. You've got Stadium Talk. You've got a new team president has come in, has brought in a whole new layer of executives. There's just everything's happening to the Bears right now. Does this excite you as a former player, invested fan, and someone who has lived in this city his whole life?
Well, it definitely does. And I know that Tom has probably had this where someone will say, you 85 guys, do you really want someone to replace you and have another Super Bowl winner? I go, well, no, I'm 70 years old. I mean, I have season tickets. I really want them to win. I mean, it's like, is it really that hard to imagine that I would like them to win? That hey, we've had more than our time at the top, and I don't think we're ever going to go away just because of the unique characters that we have. But I'm feeling optimistic, but I think you have to be realistic as well. There's just a lot of things that we don't know. I honestly believe they've made a lot of good decisions. And so I don't have any questions about polls and building the team. You know what? You have to get lucky. You have to have that serendipity where just things click and you didn't even think about stuff and it works and people start believing and good things happen. If you really look at what's going on over the last couple of years, God, I think the draft was wonderful. They've made really good free agent decisions, and players are playing. I mean, they're living up to what, and it's still a little early, but I expect this year to be, coming out of it going, okay, maybe we didn't make playoffs, but I really like the trajectory that I see both offensively and defensively. And think we're going in the right direction. We haven't been able to say that for, unfortunately, quite a while.
I just think it's got to be the continuous part of the conversation. Eventually, you have to have a team that you're talking about the playoffs every year, not just hope for the future.
Exactly. Well, Gary,
I think that is the key, is that you need that consistency, and it starts at quarterback. We all know it. Hey, you can have a good line, but you don't have the quarterback, you're not going anywhere. And so, we're all putting a lot of faith in a new quarterback. I think he's really an exciting player, and I'm looking forward to it. And, I think Swift, the offensive line, Tommy, is really still the big question. I mean,
right.
And, is the talent there? Yeah, it's there, but there just seems to be a weird, they don't seem to be able to consistently put the same 5 guys on the field. You just can't have guys, injured or not, taking time, because it takes away from all of the consistency and the comfort level and the confidence that you have in the repetitions of these plays. And that's why, I was listening to ESPN a couple of years ago, and quarterbacks were talking about, how do you, Steve Young in particular was saying, look, I knew when I scrambled that my coach, Bill Walsh, was putting his hands in his face because the play didn't work. So why didn't the play work? Was it the offensive line? Was it the quarterback? Was the receiver ran the wrong route? Whatever it was, it didn't work. And you can't have scrambling plays be consistently done because there's no rhythm in the offense. And it just becomes, hit or miss whether or not you're going to consistently be able to put points on the board. That's my view. And I think that, everybody's looking forward to, hey, we've got a lot of good talent. And now the challenge will be, and I would be, it's going to be interesting to see Hard Knocks. If I was a player, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want the cameras in there because there's a lot of emotion that goes on. You got guys making or breaking their life. This is what they have dreamed for ever, since they were little kids. And you're breaking up their dreams by cutting them. That's got to be tough.
Great stuff, Gary. And a Yaley. We got another Yaley on the team, Karan Amagaji from Hinsdale.
Absolutely. You know, I had
third-round pick.
I had brunch with him right before he went to Yale camp last year. And, you know, he's quite a stud. But I was pleasantly surprised because I knew he had that injury and he missed, all of those games. And he's still not practicing full time from what I heard. But, man, what a quality guy. You know, that I just want to end it on, I was with Richard on draft night, Richard Dent. And what really impressed me about the Bears draft choices were it just seemed like each one of them were good stand-up guys.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I think that character does matter. And I think the choices that the Bears made this year reflected that. And, it's not always, you still need to get good players. But I just came away going, all those guys were kind of likable, articulate. It just, man, you'd like them to do well.
Absolutely. We hope so. Very much. Thank you,
do.
Gary. It was fantastic. Love talking to you. You're one of the voices of Chicago. Let's call it what it is. You are. Special thanks to Bears safety Gary Fencik. For Tom, I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please subscribe now on the Chicago Bears official app, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Bear down, everybody.